The morning of my divorce hearing, my husband entered the courtroom with a confident grin, as if victory was already his. He leaned close and whispered, "You'll walk out of here with nothing." His girlfriend laughed loudly enough for the whole room to hear and added, "She doesn't deserve even a single cent." I didn't argue. I didn't even glance at them. Instead, I calmly passed my lawyer a sealed envelope and asked him to hand it to the judge at the appropriate moment. 5 minutes later, the judge opened the envelope, read 2 paragraphs, looked up, and spoke 4 words that shifted everything. Well, this changes things. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 38 years old, and the last thing my husband whispered to me before our divorce hearing started was, "You'll walk out of here with nothing." He smiled when he said it, like the result had already been determined. 5 years earlier, those words would have crushed me. That morning, they hardly made me flinch, because I already knew something he didn't. But to understand why, you have to go back 15 years. I met Ethan when we were both 23. He had grand ambitions and almost no money. I had a stable accounting position, a small apartment, and plenty of optimism for the two of us. He wanted to launch his own software firm. Everyone told him it was too risky. I didn't. I had faith in him. When we got married 2 years later, we settled on one straightforward plan. I would offer stability while he developed the business. Once it thrived, we would share the benefits together. At least that was the vision. The first 3 years were tough, really tough. Some months the company brought in almost nothing. There were evenings when Ethan returned home certain he should give up. I would sit next to him at our small kitchen table, pour him another cup of coffee, and remind him of his original reasons. "We're going to make it through this," I would say, and somehow we always did. I worked extra hours almost every week. My salary covered the mortgage, groceries, utilities, health insurance, and even many of the company's initial software costs when investors pulled out. I put off graduate school because we couldn't manage both. I delayed purchasing a new car. I skipped holidays. Every sacrifice seemed worthwhile because I thought we were creating something together. Whenever Ethan thanked me, he would say the same thing. "One day, all of this will belong to both of us." I believed every word, then everything shifted. In the company's 7th year, one of Ethan's products suddenly became a major success. Within 18 months, his venture expanded into 3 states. Interviews, awards, magazine features. Business events. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know Ethan Carter. At first, I felt proud. Watching someone you love fulfill their ambition is a wonderful thing until success began to alter him. He stopped inquiring about my day. Dinner talks turned into one-sided discussions about investors, profits, and growth. He hired helpers for the office, but somehow expected me to keep managing everything at home. When I mentioned finally going back to graduate school, he barely glanced up from his phone. "Why?" The single word surprised me. "What do you mean, why? You don't need another degree. I've always wanted one." He shrugged. "Seems pointless now." Little by little, the partnership we had created vanished. Business travels grew more frequent. Late-night sessions became normal. Weekend plans were regularly canceled. Every worry I expressed was brushed aside the same way. "You're overthinking." "You worry too much. It's just business." I wanted to trust him. Until one evening, while sorting documents for our accountant, I discovered hotel bookings that didn't match any events on Ethan's schedule. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I quietly began observing more closely. The signs became impossible to overlook. Phone calls he answered outside. Messages erased immediately after arriving. Sudden passwords on devices that had never required them before. Then one afternoon, I overheard a conversation he assumed I couldn't hear. "I'll take care of the divorce soon," he said. "I just need everything arranged first." My whole world went quiet, not because he wanted a divorce, because he had apparently been preparing one without mentioning a single word to me. That night, I didn't cry. I sat alone in our living room until dawn. Then I made a choice. If our marriage had already finished in his mind, I wasn't going to plead with him to remain. The next morning, I hired a divorce lawyer. Her name was Linda Morales. After examining everything I had provided, she leaned back in her chair. "Rachel, how much evidence do you have?" I opened a folder nearly 3 inches thick. Bank records, tax returns, emails, loan papers, receipts going back more than a decade. She looked genuinely impressed. "You've kept all of this." "I've always believed documents reveal the truth." Over the next several weeks, Ethan hired one of the city's top legal teams. Mutual friends started calling me. Apparently, Ethan had been telling everyone exactly how the divorce would conclude. He says you'll never get a penny of his company. He keeps claiming he created everything by himself. I simply thanked people for informing me. I never argued, never defended myself. The truth didn't need me to raise my voice. The morning of the hearing, Linda arranged the pile of files on our table. "Are you prepared?" I looked toward the courtroom doors. "I'm finished fighting." I smiled quietly. "I'm ready for the truth." Just then, Ethan walked in wearing a costly custom suit. Behind him came his lawyer, and seated confidently in the gallery was the woman I had seen in those hotel bookings. She caught my eye and smiled. Then Ethan leaned toward me. "You should have accepted the offer when I made it." I said nothing. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone stood. As the judge entered and prepared to start the session, I reached into my briefcase, took out one carefully sealed envelope, and quietly gave it to Linda. "Please," I whispered, "give this to the judge when the time is right." The courtroom became completely quiet as the judge took his seat. My lawyer, Linda, arranged our files while Ethan leaned back in his chair with the assurance of someone who believed the result had already been settled. He didn't even appear anxious. Why would he? He thought the company, the investments, and the future we had created together belonged only to him. His lawyer stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "Mr. Carter developed his business through his own vision, leadership, and effort, while Mrs. Carter was certainly his wife. She made no significant contribution to the creation or expansion of the company. We request the court to recognize the business as his separate accomplishment." Ethan nodded proudly, then he looked at me. A slight smile crossed his face. It was the same smile he had worn the morning he promised we would create our future together, only now it held no warmth. The judge turned toward Linda. "Mrs. Carter's response?" Linda stood calmly. "We'll address those claims, Your Honor." She didn't argue. She didn't accuse anyone of dishonesty. Instead, she walked quietly to the clerk's desk and handed over the sealed envelope I had given her. "This was prepared by my client." The judge adjusted his glasses. "What exactly is it?" "A chronological summary of documented financial support and relevant records already included in discovery." The judge nodded. "I'll review it." He carefully opened the envelope. The entire courtroom watched in silence. Ethan crossed his arms confidently. His girlfriend glanced toward me with an amused look. Neither of them seemed worried. The judge began reading. His eyes moved slowly down the first page. Then the second. He paused, went back, read one paragraph again. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes, Your Honor, you organized these records yourself." "I did," he nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate clear timelines." He returned to the letter. The first page wasn't emotional. There were no accusations, no dramatic words, only dates. March 2011. Rachel withdrew $28,000 from her personal savings to cover company payroll after investor funding was delayed. Supporting documents attached. September 2012. Rachel refinanced her vehicle to reduce monthly expenses, allowing additional household income to support business operations. Supporting bank statements attached. February 2013. Rachel postponed graduate school to continue working full-time while Ethan focused exclusively on company growth. Then came copies of emails. One caught the judge's attention. It was from Ethan. "I couldn't have kept the company alive without you. Someday everything we build will belong to both of us." The courtroom remained silent. The judge continued reading. Another email. "Thank you for covering the mortgage again. I promise this sacrifice won't be forgotten." Another. "Every investor meeting is possible because you're keeping everything else together." I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. The silence beside me was changing. The confidence he had walked in with was beginning to fade. The judge reached for the financial exhibits already submitted by both legal teams. He compared dates, bank records, loan documents, corporate filings. Every few moments he made another handwritten note. Then he looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Carter." "Yes, Your Honor. You testified that the business was entirely self-funded after its first year." "That's correct." The judge lifted one document. "Then could you explain this transfer?" Ethan frowned. His attorney leaned forward immediately. "What transfer?" "The $28,000 deposit made into the business operating account." His attorney quickly reviewed the exhibit. "That appears to be..." He stopped speaking. The judge continued calmly. It matches the same amount withdrawn from Mrs. Carter's personal savings account on the same day. No one spoke. The judge turned another page. You also stated your household expenses were independently managed. Another document appeared, yet these records indicate Mrs. Carter paid the mortgage, insurance, utilities, and health care premiums for nearly 4 consecutive years while the business operated at a loss. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. His attorney whispered something into his ear. For the first time that morning, neither of them looked confident. The judge wasn't finished. There also appears to be correspondence acknowledging Mrs. Carter's financial contributions. He held up another printed email. This message specifically thanks her for keeping the company alive. The room was so quiet I could hear pages turning. The judge looked over the top of his glasses. Mr. Carter, were these statements accurate when you wrote them? Ethan hesitated. Yes, his attorney interrupted. Your Honor, we'd appreciate a brief recess. The judge raised one hand. In a moment he returned to my timeline one final time before placing it neatly on the bench. Then he looked directly at me. Mrs. Carter, yes, Your Honor, thank you. The room remained silent. He gently tapped the organized timeline with his pen. This isn't an emotional argument, it's a factual one. He looked toward both attorneys. Based on today's testimony and these supporting documents, the court is ordering additional review of the financial disclosures before any determination regarding asset division is made. Ethan's smile had vanished. His girlfriend slowly lowered her eyes toward the floor. The judge gathered the remaining documents before adding one final sentence. When the facts are presented this clearly, they deserve to be examined just as carefully. The courtroom reconvened 3 weeks later. During that time, the court-appointed financial review team examined every document. Bank statements, tax returns, corporate records, loan agreements, email archives, everything. I didn't spend those weeks celebrating. There was nothing to celebrate. A marriage had ended. No amount of paperwork could erase that. When I walked back into the courtroom, Ethan looked different. The confidence he had worn during the first hearing had disappeared. His expensive suit was still perfectly tailored, but the certainty behind his eyes was gone. The judge entered, reviewed the final report, and spoke calmly. The financial review confirms that Mrs. Carter made substantial documented financial contributions during the company's formative years. He turned another page. The evidence also confirms that several earlier statements regarding the source of funding and household financial responsibilities were incomplete. No one said a word. The judge continued. Accordingly, the marital assets will be divided based upon the verified financial record and the applicable law. That was it. No dramatic speeches, no shouting, just the truth. After months of uncertainty, the facts spoke for themselves. The hearing ended less than 30 minutes later. As people began leaving the courtroom, Ethan remained seated. His attorney quietly gathered his files and stepped outside. Even the woman who had sat smiling behind him during the first hearing slipped out without saying a word. For the first time in years, it was just the two of us. He looked across the courtroom. Rachel, I stopped walking. I was wrong. His voice sounded quieter than I'd ever heard it. I kept telling myself that once the company became successful, everything before that didn't matter anymore. He looked down at his hands, but it did. I didn't answer immediately. He continued. I convinced myself I built everything alone because it was easier than admitting how much I depended on you. His eyes finally met mine. I'm sorry. There was no anger left inside me, only acceptance. I didn't spend 15 years helping you because I wanted credit. He nodded. I know. I helped because I loved you. Another silence settled between us. I never wanted this to become a battle. Neither did I, he admitted. I just wanted the truth. He closed his eyes for a moment. You deserve that. I wished him well. Not because he had earned forgiveness that morning, but because carrying bitterness any longer would only keep me tied to a life that was already over. A month later, the settlement was finalized. The financial outcome was fair, not extravagant, not symbolic, simply fair. For the first time in years, I wasn't building someone else's future. I was finally building my own. Instead of buying a bigger house or taking an expensive vacation, I invested in something I had postponed for almost 15 years. My own consulting firm. A business dedicated to helping small family-owned companies organize their finances, and grow responsibly. Ironically, the dream I delayed while helping Ethan build his company became the foundation of my next chapter. The first client who walked through my office doors reminded me of us years earlier. Young, hopeful, trying to build something meaningful. This time I wasn't standing behind someone else's dream. I was standing inside my own. Sometimes people ask whether I felt victorious after the divorce. The truth surprises them. I never wanted revenge. Revenge would have kept me looking backward. What I wanted was acknowledgement. Not applause, not sympathy. Just the simple recognition that quiet sacrifices matter even when they happen behind closed doors. The courtroom gave me that. But something even more important happened long before the judge read my letter. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's appreciation. For years, I believed my value depended on whether the person beside me recognized everything I'd done. I was wrong. My value had been there all along. The judge didn't create it. The documents didn't create it. The settlement didn't create it. They simply revealed what had always been true. And as I locked the door to my new office on my first day in business, I smiled. Because the greatest thing I walked away with wasn't part of any settlement. It was the confidence to know that the strongest foundation I would ever build was the one beneath my own life.